Hello, my name is Madeline, and welcome to American Family Insurance DreamBank, where we believe in the transformative power of dreams. I'm thrilled to have you with us today, and I'm excited to learn alongside of all of you. For those of you that are familiar with DreamBank, welcome back. And for those of you this is your first time joining us, welcome. Here at American Family Insurance, we believe communities are stronger and the future is brighter when people are actively pursuing their dreams. That's why we created DreamBank, an inspirational community, destination, and digital experience dedicated to dreamers everywhere. From our daily event series to immersive signature programs, there's something for every dreamer. Our always free offerings are designed to help you celebrate your dream journey, overcome obstacles, and stay motivated. Shameless plug, we have our 2-day Dream Summit coming up November 1st and 2nd. So I really encourage you all to sign up for that. It is over the 2 days, but it's also like recorded. So if you can't watch it live, you can come to it the next 30 days, all of November. So just a little shameless plug, an opportunity for you to check in on your dream. I cannot believe that this is going on for so long, but I will now introduce you to today's speaker. Abby Rose Green is a life and business coach, podcaster, and Down syndrome inclusion advocate. She co-owns Pursuing Her Purpose, a business devoted to helping the budding entrepreneur launch their own big idea without losing themselves, their values, or their relationships along the way. Abby also co-owns Herself, a podcast and community that has over 3 million downloads and focuses on getting women one step further than they are today. Abby understands that our lives will look different. Discovering the titles that are important to each of us and supporting each other in the ways we can is a way we can all win. Find Abby on Instagram at Abby Rose Green. All right, Abby, I will take it away. And the sirens have stopped. So the stage is yours.
Well, and it's funny because the sirens are also going off here, but I feel like it always sounds so much louder to you when you're in the room than to anybody else. So welcome here, everyone. This is going to be a fun conversation to have. And we were talking about this. The word fun, you'll be thinking, I don't know about this, Abby. I'm kind of nervous about this discussion. Fun, not quite sure. But the reason I say fun is because you can continue to learn with this topic. Today, we'll be going over kind of level 1, level 2, maybe a little bit of level 3. But then as you start to get confident with it, you can continue to move on. So as we get into today's conversation, these are the questions that I used to fear. Like, Mom, why does that kid look so weird? Hey, Dad, that big kid over there, as of course he points, he can't talk. What's wrong with him? What's Down syndrome? Can I catch it? Does it hurt? Or maybe, why does he make those sounds when he's supposed to be having quiet time? So do these questions sound familiar? These were the questions that I used to be so nervous that I would get. I would immediately feel like I was getting into a position where I was offending somebody. I would hush my child, like, no, you didn't say that. Shh, don't have that conversation. And I would try to sweep things under the rug. Does that sound familiar? Have you been there? Like, the biggest thing here is that if you have been there, it's okay, because most of us have been nervous about something that we haven't learned before, which is why we're having the conversation today. Because with all of this, let's just gain some confidence. Maybe you grew up in a community much like mine where you weren't around kids with extra needs. You weren't around people who had disabilities. Everyone was typical. And we'll talk about these words quite a bit more, but these are the little and big things that we'll talk about today, and you can definitely bring into future conversations. So just on a scale of 1 to 10 right now, let's start off with, how nervous are you to have this conversation? So in the chat, just drop a 1 if you are really, really fearful that you are going to be offensive. Maybe you don't want your child to say anything. These are the questions that you'll immediately hush. That was me. So I'm just going to say it right there. That was me even 4 years ago. So drop a 1 all the way to a 10 being, yes, I can have this conversation. I feel so good. Abby, I could be right alongside you having this speech right now. Awesome. I'm seeing some high numbers, 9s. Okay. Some 3s and 6s, some 1s. Yeah, it's all over the board. And a lot of it has to deal with where we've already been, our experiences in the past, but also, are we okay having this specific conversation? And I'm just telling you that how I reacted with, shh, don't say that. Don't say that, you're gonna be offensive. It doesn't help our kids. It also doesn't help our world become a more inclusive place, because we aren't able to teach them what we wish we would know. And that again is why we're in the room today. Like, my goal today is to help you build this confidence. It's also to start the conversation if you've never had one before with your kids, so that they know that different is just different. It's not bad, it's not scary. And after all, we all have things that make us unique. So a little bit more about me. I'm a mom. I have learned patience. I've learned respect for those who have come before me, but it really did start off with becoming a mom. So if you are a parent who's listening right now, having our first, it made me become more patient. I always thought that I could do things. My type A, perfectly controlled plan always worked out. And then I had a baby. And because of that, all of a sudden I had to learn to just kind of go with the flow a little bit more. When I birthed our second, Micah, our son, I realized that I no longer could do it all. That superwoman mentality that so many of us can do. Maybe you have a really good sleeper as your first, or he or she is able to eat really well. Okay, I had a pretty ideal, convenient baby for my first. With my second, add in allergies, add in just a second kid, I realized that surrendering and accepting help that was offered was going to be the way that I had to do life. But then when I birthed our youngest, Owen has Down syndrome. And I'll tell a little bit more about that part of the story, but it really turned me into an advocate. And not just for him, but for others who were like him. It opened up my eyes to this world of differing abilities, this world of disabilities, this world of special needs, this world of extra needs that I just didn't know or understand before. I also understood that I was uncomfortable. And for the first time in my life, I was not for the first time in my life, but the first time in my life as a mom, I was having my third kid and thinking, I have to learn all of this all over again. So right now in this conversation that we're having, you might be really well versed in a lot of conversations, but this one today, this one might be something that you're nervous about. But just know that becoming a parent, it changes us. And when I use the word parent today, maybe you don't have kids of your own, but maybe you're an aunt or an uncle. Maybe you're a teacher. Maybe you're a caregiver. And becoming a caregiver, being around children, it changes all of us. And in some ways, we might miss the things that we leave behind. But we also know that in order to become the human beings that we are meant to become, to help raise these tiny and wonderful humans, sometimes we have to say goodbye to some things in order to say yes and hello to a whole bunch of other, even more wonderful components of us. I've mentioned this type A thing, and I will continue to mention it because when you're talking about extra needs and special needs and disabilities and differing abilities, when you have a plan and all of a sudden it doesn't work out, I mean, I was definitely thrown for a loop. We received our Down syndrome diagnosis in the middle of the pandemic. I was at the appointment completely by myself. My partner, Colin, wasn't able to join because it was pandemic times and you could only have one person in the room. And so hearing those words, hearing all the different soft markers, it was really, really challenging. And even being a mom in the past, I knew that I was going to be doing something different, that my life was going to be different. And as parents, we can always think that we should be doing more. Do you have that idea like, okay, I should be doing more. I should be reading with my kids more. I should be making more homemade meals. I should be playing with them more, being outside more. But then when we make the perfect plan, things change. And so if you're a parent of a kiddo with extra needs or not, know that we're in the same boat here with things changing and needing to just kind of go with the flow sometimes, but also do some preparation, build some confidence, which is why we're having this conversation today. When I was pregnant with Owen, I was scared. Like, I'm just going to say that. And so if you have people in your life right now who maybe they just received a diagnosis, maybe they have been through one and it's kind of changed them a little bit, know that hearing that type of news is scary for a parent. So that helps in your conversations when you're having them with kids because you can see where their parents are coming from. And for me, it wasn't that I had a bad experience with special needs, it was I had no experience with it. So think back to when you were younger. I'm 37 right now, so I'm just going to throw that one out there. When I was younger, growing up in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, which is just in the southeastern part of the state, we didn't have kids in our classrooms that had extra needs. I would look around and most of the kids would be typical. So as a parent, I felt really unequipped. I felt unprepared. I felt like I wasn't suitable for this position that I was given of special needs mom. Like, why me? Why should I be doing this? I am not going to be good at this. And then when he came, everything changed. But that didn't come without a lot of back and forth. I mean, even just thinking back, so just think back to your childhood right now. And if in the chat you want to jot down a few things, like what was your experience growing up with kids that looked different, acted different, kids that maybe had disabilities or extra needs? Were they mainstreamed? So were they in your classrooms? Were they in a separate wing of the building, like how our special ed classrooms were taken up? We didn't have kids with different needs in our classrooms, and that's what I remember. Sports, they were full of kids. Oh, my slides aren't moving forward. Okay. um, Let me just pause here.
I think you're sharing the wrong web, like it's just your web browser, so you might be sharing the wrong screen.
Oh, that would make sense. Hold, guys. New share here. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, good. There we go. Yeah, this presentation wouldn't be very fun if you're just looking at a web browser, so thank you for sharing that with me. Yeah, I'm seeing this. So some kids were there for the morning, then they'd go to a different room. Same boat. So people aren't in the same room as you. You aren't seeing your needs. It's not that you had a bad experience, that you had no experience. Okay. Some of the kids were mainstreamed right away. There was a special ed classroom. Okay, so if you have somebody in your family that maybe has Down syndrome or an extra need, that's something that right away you have more capacity with it, you have more information with it, you have more experience with it. We'd have kids with disabilities join us in music and gym class, and then they went somewhere else. And it's so interesting, Jerry, that you say this. I'm not sure where, because I think that's the thing, is that like some of these kids, they are in your classroom for part of it, and then you're wondering, wait, where did Owen go? Where did Johnny go? Where are they going after this? And now things are quite a bit different, at least in Wanakee, Wisconsin, where our kids are going to school. I mean, just for instance, this is our kiddo right now, and he is in a school setting right now where he started at the age of 3. He is in this really awesome group of people where about half of them or 3/4 of them have special needs. And then there's a group of peer role models. So the peer role models, there's this long list of people who want to be there because of the confidence and the leadership skills that these 3 and 4-year-olds give to kids like my Owen. They're able to teach them how we stay quiet. They're able to teach them how we walk in a line. They're able to teach them how we use finger paints, like in this photo. Or maybe, Owen, you should be using a paintbrush. Like, this is how we use a paintbrush. But to be able to see that at the age of 3 or 4, think of how different our lives would be. Think of how different these conversations would be. And that's why I'm so excited for our kids to grow up in this type of society, in this type of world, because it will just be different and different in a good way, of more mainstreamed, more conversations. In kindergarten, Owen will be mainstreamed into school. So he'll be in a typical classroom surrounded by other typical kids, and he might have an aide with him. He even rides the same school bus as his big siblings every morning. So yeah, he's in a 5-point harness, but we get him on the school bus 3 days a week. He goes off to school. He feels like such a big kid. So these words right here: speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy. So some kids need these because of a lot of extra needs. Others just need them because they need a little bit of support. Maybe they have a little bit of a delay in reading, or they're using their same hand for every single thing and forgetting about their other hand. Even typically developing kids, or kids that you would look at and say, hey, why are they in this extra classroom, or this extra needs classroom, or in this extra class? Even those kids are able to get some extra support. I love that, because our world is looking to support children of all needs in the ways that they need it most. And what this means for us is that our children are going to be around others with differences and disabilities. And this, my friends, is a really good thing. They're going to be surrounded with people who look different from them right from the start, so that the offensive words that might come out are more out of curiosity. And you, in a parent or caregiving role, are able to have the conversations in a safer setting. Okay, so why it's counterproductive to not talk about differing abilities and disabilities. Because I get it, it's a heck of a lot easier to not have the tough conversations. But if they don't hear it from you, they're going to hear it from somebody else. And those words, those phrases, those lessons, even how they're saying it, it might not align with your values or what feels right. So I want you to know that you do know more than you think. You're coming to this conversation because you might lack some confidence, but the other kids, they could be very, very far off. So if they're hearing about it on a school bus, for instance, versus from you, you probably know a little bit more than the kids on the school bus. So they're going to hear it from someone. Let's have the conversation now so that you feel comfortable saying it. So in the chat, I do want to know, if you have not had this conversation, why is it? So number one, your kids are just too young. So you're joining this proactively to be like, hey, Abby, teach me what I need to teach my kids in order to have these conversations when I'm older or when they're older. Number two, you just don't know where to start. So you've been pushing out the conversation because you don't know those beginning conversation starters. Number three, maybe you're nervous about answering correctly. Or four, something totally different. So of these, jot it down in there. Okay, Ryan, yep, too young. And if you want to jot down why the other is, you can put that in there too. A lot of people being nervous about answering correctly. We'll talk about the appropriate age too. So that is definitely coming. Yeah, I'm liking that a lot of you are learning just to learn right now, and that in the future you'll have these conversations. But right now, you're in the learning phase too. Okay, so what does this mean for you? You might be uncomfortable, okay? You might be uncomfortable. And Miranda, you said it perfectly. You might be fearing that you're missing something. So in the conversation, you might be worried that you are not having all the words, or you're saying the wrong things, or maybe you're missing the good introduction or how to end it. I get that. I was there too. But know that you are the best person to explain this to your child. And we're going to talk about keeping things positive. We're going to talk about keeping things really direct, but also to embrace their curiosity. Like, your kids are curious. Human beings by nature are curious. It's how we learn. If we always say that we know the answers, that puts us in a really tough position for not learning anything new. So why not learn with them and learn how to do it right from the start? So someone asked, when do we start these conversations? Okay, for starters, have the conversation when they ask. So maybe you have a 5-year-old who says, hey, mom, there's a kid in a wheelchair over there. Why is that kid in a wheelchair? Or maybe some of those questions that you had at the beginning, like, mom, why does that kid look so weird? Or why does that person not have 2 arms? You know, maybe like, what's Down syndrome? Does it hurt? Can I catch it? When they start asking those questions, instead of being nervous, embrace it. You can also have the conversation when they start to have this look of curiosity. And for kids, it might not be like, hey, mom, this is my question. It might be staring. Like, they're looking at somebody who looks different than them, and you notice the stare. And instead of them saying something, they might be a little bit nervous. Or at the time, they might be scared, because different can be scary in some situations, especially when you're younger and you don't know what it might be. So when you see them staring or maybe walking away, perfect time to have the conversation. Another one is when you know you're going to a place where there's going to be people who might have disabilities or are looking or acting different than they do. There was a Down syndrome walk that just happened in Madison just this last weekend. And I know last year we went with a big group of our friends. And before we went, we let our kids know, hey, there's gonna be a lot of people with Down syndrome. And our 7-year-old Lucy said, yeah, we know Down syndrome, like totally cool. Like, we live with Owen, like we know what Down syndrome looks like. But she hasn't seen very many older adults with Down syndrome. So we just had to explain, like, hey, there's gonna be people of all ages. And then we went online and we looked through some photos, and she's like, oh, okay. But for Lucy, she's somebody who talks a lot. She says everything that's on her mind, and she's not trying to be offensive, but she's going to ask the really hard conversations. She's going to ask the tough questions, and she's going to do it in front of the group. So if you ever feel nervous about that, have it preemptively. Have it before you're going somewhere, if you're able to. I want you to take a screenshot of this, or even just pull out your phone right now and take a picture of this. So at the beginning, you're one of the people who said, I don't know where to start. You answered the question with, I don't know what should I even start this conversation with? What words should I say? Sometimes that first line is the hardest part of the conversation. It's kind of like when you're working out, getting your gym shoes on and putting on your workout clothes. That's sometimes the hardest part of a workout. Same thing with having tough conversations. So these right here are excellent point blank conversation starters. It's okay to ask questions. If you don't know what to say, start there. Another one, not all disabilities are visible. Before we got on, we were talking about things like autism, dyslexia, things that you might not be able to see from somebody, but after you get to meet the person, then you understand, okay, there's just something different about them than me. So just saying not all disabilities are visible is a really great conversation starter for somebody who's like, but I thought that you had to be able to see a disability. Another great one is everyone should be respected. We all have value. And this is one that I wish a lot of the middle schoolers and high schoolers knew, especially when I was growing up. We have already had really offensive conversations with people who have said terrible words to us and our family. And if they would know the word respect and that everyone has value, I think that it would just stop a lot of those conversations from happening. And a lot of people from, just being in those really, really hard moments with your kids. Another one is disabilities aren't scary, sad, or weird. And I use this line all the time because yes, the kids will say things like, that person looks weird. Like, right away, they don't know what other word to use. And we simply say, they're not scary, sad, or weird. It's just something that's different about them. You might be starting to get a lot of questions about wheelchairs or even different types of tools. So in classrooms, many of your kids might see other kids on iPad, for instance, and they think that it's an iPad. And they're like, why do they get to have tablet time when we don't? Well, what I'm learning now is that it's actually an ACC device in many cases. And all that means is that it's a way that they can communicate a little bit easier. And so just explaining like, oh, guess what? Like, that person needs an assistive device. It makes their life just go a little bit more smoothly. Like, maybe we can have some iPad time on the weekend instead. And then finally here, this is last, definitely not least. I mean, I could go through a whole bunch of different ones here, but saying we all have similarities, we all have differences, both should be celebrated. That is an easy statement that you can say, and it leads into even more conversation. So it'd be helpful if we walked through a little bit of a script right now. So right now you might be like, okay, there's all these different points. Abby's been talking about all these different things, but where do I start the conversation? I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. How do I end it? What words should I say? Let's go into that part of it. So for starters, acknowledge their question. Hey, great question. Okay, so you're wondering, why can't Owen talk? And why is he so much smaller than all of your friends? Okay, those are good questions. And if you want to take some photos of this during it, you definitely can. I'm gonna go back one more just because I didn't say that before. But again, the conversation starter is sometimes the scariest part for adults. So great question. You're wondering, just repeat exactly what they said. This way they feel seen, they feel heard, and they know, okay, my mom or dad is talking to me specifically about this, and they're gonna answer my question. It also helps if you get down to their level. It makes them feel safe. I just mentioned about like actually hearing them, because there's been so many times where you might be in the car, and I still do this as a mom, where they're talking and they're talking and they're talking. You're like, yep, sounds good. Okay, sounds good, because you're overwhelmed, you're driving, you're trying to multitask, they're asking questions, you're trying to just get from point A to point B, and there's traffic everywhere. And all of a sudden you get home and you're like, hey mom, you promised that we'd go get ice cream on the way. And you're like, I had no idea that was going on. So instead, for you and for them, be in the conversation. Again, it's easier to just shuffle it under the rug, but for this, we're going to be in the conversation, because the first few times you have the conversation, it's going to just leave such an impact on them, and an impact in a really, really positive way. Also know that they're most likely not being offensive intentionally. Kids are just curious. And again, I've been bringing up our 7-year-old quite a bit during this, but she is somebody who is loud. She will say what's on her mind, and you might have one of those kids as well. And so you might be nervous in social situations because you're nervous that your kid is going to say the things that might sound offensive. But just know that they're most likely not. And so getting down to their level and explaining to them in an easy way that they can understand is the best thing for both of you. So this is where it gets fun. Help them notice all the different similarities. So when you're looking at the other kiddo who might have an extra need or a disability or a special need or a different ability, and when I say these, I do just want to take a quick break here. All those words might be offensive to somebody. And that is also a very difficult part about the special needs community. Even the word special needs or disability, some people are like, I prefer differing ability. Or someone else is like, nope, say it as it is. Like, I have special needs. Others prefer extra needs. So all of those words, know that it's difficult in a wide sense, in a mass sense, to be like, yep, always say this. Is difficult because some people might take some offense to it. But if you're ever in a conversation with somebody and you're saying something and you notice them, get a little bit nervous, be like, hey, would you prefer if I used a different term? And if they say, yes, use the term extra needs, that's more helpful. Perfect. And then just change your dialogue that way. So kind of back to the script. When you're talking with your child, have them notice the similarities. And they might say some very outlandish things. So just know that right away. So what do you and Owen both have the same of? Okay, you both have blue eyes. Okay, good. Yeah, you're right. You do have blue eyes. Look at that. Okay, you both have the same color hair. Yep, that's blonde hair. I do see that you're both wearing a red shirt. Okay, look at that. It's kind of the same red shirt. Oh, his is short sleeve and yours is long sleeve. Yep. And go along with it. Like, they might get off track a little bit, and that's okay. Make it fun, make it playful, make it a conversation. Don't just get to your end destination. Make the journey with them. They might say things like, that person has 2 arms. And I'm saying, yes, absolutely, they have 2 arms. Because then when you meet somebody who might have only 1 arm, or maybe they're in a wheelchair and they're without a leg, you can say, oh yeah, that is something that's different. But what else do you have the same? You can even talk about things if they know the person. Maybe they've been in a classroom before. Maybe they're in a daycare setting. You've seen them at the park. Yes, you both like dinosaurs. I love all these things. These are all the things you guys have the same of. And when you start it with the similarities, right away, it opens it up, A, to more positivity, but B, there's a long list of things that are the same. There's a really, really long list. And if they need some help, go ahead and jot some things down. Like, just give them some prompts. Like, okay, do you both have ears? Okay. Are you both wearing shoes? So those are all okay things to say if the conversation isn't going, super smoothly right from the start. And then, depending on the age, you can share the reason behind it. So for older kids with Down syndrome specifically, and I can go into different types of disabilities, but you might be able to talk about chromosomes and how chromosomes make up a body. But when you're talking to a 3, 4, or 5-year-old, chromosomes might be a little bit too upper level. So we use something like this when we first found out that we were having a baby with Down syndrome. At that point, we had a almost 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and then I was pregnant. And we would say something like, this baby has something called Down syndrome. And then just letting them know, mommy, daddy, your siblings, we don't have Down syndrome, and we never will. I think a lot of times people are like, oh my gosh, can I catch it? Is this something that if I'm around them too much that I'll get it too? But all that it means is that this human being will learn to talk, read, ride a bike at a different pace than your other friends, and might need more help along the way. I do love saying things that they like. So yeah, will Owen be able to eat pizza? Absolutely. He loves pizza. Pepperoni is his favorite. Will he be able to eat apples and ice cream? Yes, absolutely. Loves chocolate topping on that ice cream. He will be able to ride a bike? Yeah, he will. Maybe his bike will look a little bit different. You want to look online to see some cool bikes that Owen might ride? Or yes, of course Owen will ride a bike. Just may take him a little bit longer. And again, it's keeping it positive in all of this, but it's also giving them reasons because they are going to be curious. And then I like to pull in whatever disability it is isn't a bad thing. And it's just one part of Owen. Only having 1 arm is just one part of Johnny. Having autism is just one part of Lucas. After all, we all have things that make us different, and that's what makes the world so beautiful. It's so simple, but it's so impactful for these kiddos. You don't need to have a 3-minute speech prepared. You need to have just a few bullet points of things to say along the way. And then to end, maybe end with an action. The easiest one is, should we go say hi to Owen? Very easy. You're not making them be friends. You're not forcing them into anything. If you wanted to say, should we ask him to play catch with us? And if your kiddo's like, yeah, sure, awesome, easy invitation. But just saying hi, that right there is the perfect way to just end the conversation and go on to the next step. If you notice that your child is having some confusion, or you notice that they still might be staring, or that they want to ask another question, feel free to do that too. Like, okay, do you have any other questions about this? I'm happy to answer them. When I was little, I had a lot of questions too. I had a lot of questions, and I was so glad that my mommy or daddy walked me through them too. So with these, this is just a basic script. So I want to know in the chat, I mean, we may not all be at a 10 where we feel super prepared and we want to have this conversation, but through talking through that script, do you feel a little bit more prepared to have this conversation? And maybe if you're at a 1, just jot down there what's going to help you feel more confident. And I can make sure that I answer that in the next couple of minutes here. Heather, 10, I love that. Casey, I love that you said that your daughter has Down syndrome too, and that you can't wait to share this with her daycare teachers. Yes, and sometimes sharing this type of information with a daycare teacher or with the caregiver, it gives them the confidence too. Because a lot of times they're like, okay, I'm really good at taking care of kids. However, I'm not sure if I know how to take care of all types of kids. So this is a really easy way to make them confident too. Yes, and just taking these conversations in the right direction, I feel, is the perfect way of saying it. Because you don't have to be an expert level genius in this. It's just a conversation starter and remembering a few of the things along the way. So I did want to add in a few more pieces here. A lot of times parents of kids with disabilities, they want others to know things, but they don't have a social platform like I have, or they're not up in front of the DreamBank community speaking on a topic like this. So I asked my Instagram audience, because I do have a lot of parents who follow me who do have kiddos with special needs, and I asked them, what do you want others to know? Because in the Down syndrome community, I've been talking with people about Down syndrome nonstop, but there are so many other disabilities out there that I also wanted to make sure I shine the light on. And Terry, I'm gonna just like pull this into the conversation here. When you said we all have more similarities than differences, having that just relay into this next part is gonna be the most important piece. Understanding that as a parent of a kid with typical kids, or as a parent of a kid who has extra needs, special needs, a disability, or differing abilities, we all have more similarities than differences. But there are a few things that my friends in the special needs community also wanted you to know. So for starters, it's important to encourage typical kids to talk to kids who are different than them. You might notice that your kids have friends and they continue to talk to the same friends. Okay, and that's not a bad thing. We trust people, we like people, we're connected to people, and a lot of times we'll just keep on talking to the exact same people. It's kind of like eating the exact same thing for lunch every day, or getting into any type of routine, driving home in the exact same way. But when we can open up our meal plan, I mean, we open up the directions that we go, we can open up our friend circle to more people, it lets others feel more included. Because chances that that kiddo with extra needs is the one who's always being unincluded from things is a lot higher than a kiddo with typical needs. And this mom brought up right away, pointing out that similarity. So yeah, that little boy's hand does look different than yours. That's the way that he or she was made. That's how he or she was born. Oh, look, one thing you do have in common. You both like to play with blocks. Maybe he wants to play. when we're thinking about things that aren't always visible, that's also something that people might look at and be like, wait, I'm not sure what this exactly means. So just knowing that they're just as smart as everyone else. And the fear of being bullied is very, very high with our kids that have extra needs. Our kids are, I mean, my Owen has two older siblings that are definitely going to stand up for him on the playground, but I've already seen it happen. I've already seen people around us who don't know our family, but for people around us to be like saying the R word, for instance, or saying derogatory terms. And whether they know it or not, our child is one of those people that you're calling out right now. And so being bullied is something that we really do fear. And so helping your children be more inclusive and standing up for them when they're capable, when they're able, when they're willing is also something that I know a lot of parents want to hear or want you to know. If you're friends with somebody who has kids with extra needs, sometimes they're saying no to plans. Or if you work with somebody who has a kid with extra needs, the daily medical requirements is a lot more. I had no idea how many medical appointments would be involved in my life until having a kiddo with Down syndrome. I mean, even during the pandemic, the first half of pregnancy, I didn't even see the doctor. It was my third pregnancy. I felt very confident. I knew things were going well. And then when we went to go do the anatomy scan, it was like, should we do the anatomy scan? Should we not? I'm like, you know what? I haven't seen a doctor at all. I should probably go see a doctor at some point during this pregnancy, even though I'm a third-time mom. And so we said yes to the anatomy scan. And that's when we found out all the soft markers. And that's when literally our world was flipped upside down. But before that, we had no doctor's appointments. And then we were having doctor's appointments about 2 or 3 times every single week until our baby was born in the middle of the pandemic. Yes, the number of times I got my temperature taken and had to answer that questionnaire. I mean, I could probably memorize the questionnaire at this point because of how many times I had to answer all of them. But even after a kiddo is born, or when you're going to physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, psychological appointments, like there's so many different appointments that are involved. So if you have a friend or a coworker or someone close to you, a family member, and they're saying no to some things during the day, just give them a little bit of empathy. They're not uptight. They just have a really jam-packed schedule. And I know we're all busy human beings. I'm not saying that somebody has a more difficult schedule than somebody else, but the added appointments and the added drive time and then the added follow-up on top of it, it just can be quite a bit. I like this one. I love when adults acknowledge my child and say hi, and then continue to engage with him even after they realize he doesn't speak. He's worth all the words. So just because somebody can't speak, and this is a great learning lesson for your kiddos too, doesn't mean that they don't understand. Doesn't mean that they can't hear. Doesn't mean that they're not smart, that they're not part of the conversation. So even people who can't speak back still want to be spoken to. So engaging in that conversation, still having play. Play is an incredible tool in order to communicate. And the great thing with kids is that it comes so naturally. I think as adults, a lot of times play has been replaced with work or with a to-do list, but for kids, it comes so naturally. So encouraging them to play as a way of saying hello and a way of communicating, even if the other kiddo doesn't have words, a great step for your kiddo. SLP stands for speech and language pathologist. And so one of her favorite things to say is just say hi. And so if you learned anything today, if you see somebody with a different ability, or if you see somebody who looks different than your kids, just encouraging that startup conversation of saying hello. Our kiddo with extra needs, Owen, he's still young. He's 3 years old. And right now, I mean, he's the center of attention when he goes places because he's the cool kid. He sings and dances and he makes sure to give high fives. He gives really deep hugs. So he stands out quite a bit in front of a group. But other kids are really shy, or their disability, it might not be visible and they might be more nervous for it, or they might be overly sensitive to different noises or sounds or lights. And because of that, they might hide a little bit. And so inviting and introducing can be a great step. I also like this forced friendship. So just having a simple connection can go so far. We're not forcing anything. We're not saying you have to be friends with somebody who has, this, who has this, who has this. Like, we need differences in our life. That's not what we're saying. We're just doing a simple invitation. This also, and Dorothy, I'm going to answer your question with this one. This also helps answer like the why stage. So when there's a follow up of like, well, but why doesn't that kid talk? And if you're like, I actually don't know, a great thing to do is just sit down and go to Google. And if you go to Google, don't grab the first thing that's on there. Like, go to a reputable page. But if you're like, you want to look together? Like, would you like to do that together? Let's go do that. And just reading through good information together is a great place to start. Another thing with that, if you're like, I want to do some more research on my own, and if they continue to ask the same question, maybe there's a kiddo in their class that has a specific need that is very, very different, go do some research on your own and feel confident in that response, so that when you come back with the two sentences that you need to talk to your daughter who's definitely in that why, or that your granddaughter who's definitely in that why stage, you have an answer to it. Yeah, are there any other people who have kids in the why stage? That's a big one, like definitely a big one. And I think that if you go to, there's so many different disabilities. So Samantha, I'm answering your question right now about different recs for reputable online sources. There's so many different disabilities, and every single one has a different conversation attached with it. I was actually going to pull that into this conversation, but I feel like that's like level 4. First person language versus third person language versus saying the word special need versus disability. I don't want you guys to fear any of this, so that's why I didn't pull that part into it. But if you go to Instagram and use the hashtag like Down syndrome awareness or Down syndrome, there's going to be so many top accounts that pop up, and the top accounts are going to be good reputable sources because there's people who have been following them, that highly engaged. It's not going to be the ones that just have 10 people who are following them and the only comments are negative derogatory comments. If you want anything specific for Down syndrome, Gigi's Playhouse is a great one. If you go to anything with Jack's Basket, that's a really great source. And each of those pages generally has a follow-up page that goes along with it. I know that during this, you might be gaining some confidence with it, but another parent also said that if you know one child with autism or maybe with Down syndrome or whatever the extra need is, you don't know everything about my child. Sometimes even being like, oh, just a typical boy, like your kid is just as normal as mine. But then it's so difficult because they might be throwing things at the grocery store or needing to hum when they're in a classroom. And it's like, it's hard because we are in a special category. Like, my child with Down syndrome is not a typical child. And so knowing that sometimes it can feel a little bit offensive if you're like, nope, just like everyone else, when it's very obvious that that child isn't like everyone else, can also feel a little bit like, but I want you to see that it is a little bit difficult for our family. Or I want you to see that when our child can't sit during circle time and has to hum and rock instead, that that's okay. Because your child has things that are different for them, and my child has things that are different for him, and that's all okay in it. But just knowing that we're not going to all be the same. At the beginning, I believe somebody was talking about the behaviors, and if I don't answer the specific question, make sure to drop it in the chat again, because there's quite a bit of chat going on, but I wanted to make sure I answered it when I got to this page right here. So if a kiddo is throwing books at the library, or we see at the supermarket, sometimes with Owen, he bites, for instance, because that's a way that he gets feedback. He has low tone, and it's a way that like he knows that his body's getting feedback. There's just like different things with each disability that comes along with it. Know that we are trying, and that things do sometimes take time. So being patient and having some empathy. Like, is it okay that my child is biting yours? We're not saying that. But we are saying that we're not just around allowing them to do everything, allowing them to throw books at the library, allowing them to throw cans off the grocery store, allowing them to bite. We're not saying that either. We're trying really, really hard in all of this. And so when you do see these situations, offer a helping hand. Be like, hey, is there anything I can do to help right now? That'd be an easy way of saying it, instead of like giving the eye roll, which we've definitely gotten a lot of, and it just makes a hard situation even harder. And this one kind of goes back with the visibility. So I feel like nowadays there are many, many, many disabilities that go not visible. And so having that conversation with your kids, but then also just understanding for yourself that the big emotions, the outbursts, the behaviors, it's not because that person is a bad parent. It's not because they aren't teaching their child incorrectly at home. It might be a special need. It might be a disability. So I know this whole conversation wasn't about how to support a parent of a disabled child, but these came in so often that I just thought that I would put it up here and help people out. I know when we first got our diagnosis, we had so many people say, I am so sorry. I am so sorry that you have a baby with Down syndrome. And I remember it felt weird at the time. I couldn't tell what felt weird about it. I just felt like it didn't feel right. And now that I'm on the other side of it, and we've had a child with Down syndrome for over 3 years now, I know that it's not something to be sorry about because it is just part of Owen. And I'm going to say right now, a lot of the parts of Owen that make up that 47th chromosome, that extra chromosome, are the parts that we love about him, like his almond eyes and the fact that he's so squishy and the fact that he loves to hug and that he sleeps like a champ since he was born. Like those are things, the fact that he loves life, the fact that he always wants to say hello to people. Those things wouldn't be as obvious, they wouldn't be as big of his life if he was born typical. And so the words, I'm sorry, it just hurts a little bit. Instead, you could say something like, congratulations. I know this wasn't part of your plan, but this baby is so lucky to have you. That could be a very simple phrase if you like don't know what to say, but you want to say something when somebody offers their news. When we first got our news, we had everything from like toxic positivity of like, you're gonna be the best, like this is amazing, so excited to have a kiddo with extra needs in our family, we've never had one. I was like, I'm not ready for that, I'm not ready for that either. All the way to, I am so sorry, like this sucks for you, Abby. I don't know what to do, but I'm so sorry you're going through this. So instead saying something like, congratulations. I know this wasn't part of your plan, but this baby is so lucky to have you. So Dorothy, that could be something very simple to say. You could also ask questions instead of inferring. If you are like, oh, they definitely need a whole bunch of extra help right now, they definitely want me to take their kids, be like, hey, would it be helpful if I took your older kids while you took your youngest to therapy this weekend? Would that be helpful for you? Just asking questions, or even asking like, hey, does the word special needs, does that not feel good to you? Like, would there be another word that I could use instead? I've used that so many times because I've been nervous now, like talking to people where I use the word extra needs. That's what I usually use. And I do use the word disability, but then I've heard other people say, oh my gosh, the word disability, like that doesn't sit well with me. So just ask. You can always ask. And I feel like asking the questions like, whoa, they want to learn. I love this. This is great. And most people will respond pretty darn positively. If you do have capacity for support, I know special needs parents, they do have a little bit extra on their plate compared to the parents of just typical kids, just with added appointments and stuff like that. So that's one way. If you don't know what to say and you have extra capacity, that's something you could always do. Sometimes you just want a friend to talk to. There's a lot of thoughts that go through all of our minds as parents. And I think just opening up the conversation too, to just learn what another parent is going through, I think it's so interesting. My best friends and I, we have conversations about our marriages often, where we speak very openly about our marriages. And I just think the perspective is so wonderful because you learn things about parenting or about marriage or about life or about work. And you all of a sudden become more appreciative of the things that you do have. And you can just grow a kinder, more empathetic heart to the things that might be really difficult for somebody else. Speak up for inclusion if you're not seen or represented. Of all of this is one that is so difficult for many people to do and also so important. Like as an advocate, as somebody who has a kiddo with extra needs, I am going to always be advocating. I will speak up when someone says something that might be derogatory or not correct with today's times. I will just say it right in the moment, not to be like, nope, you're saying that wrong, but instead to be like, hey, I know that people used to say Down's baby. Actually, we prefer my baby with Down syndrome. We just say the whole thing. Instead of saying my Down's child, let's just flip the script and say your baby with Down syndrome. Okay? And then just making a learning lesson. If they screw up again, totally okay. We're all learning. We're going to make mistakes. With anything that we learned in the last couple of years is that we're not going to get it right always the first time, but learning and growing is the important piece. This is another one to take a really good screenshot of. These are books that can help continue the conversation. And I will say that the last two are Down syndrome specific, but all of these are great books if you want to have the conversation, start the conversation with your kiddos, but maybe you aren't going to be at a place where there are individuals who have differences, or maybe your kiddos haven't been asking the questions, or maybe they haven't had that look of curiosity. These are books just to start to bring into your life to make not only your reading collection more diverse, which I think is an important thing for our kids to see people who look different than them. And this isn't just with, it's with all kinds of disabilities. It's with all kinds of differences. So this is a good screenshot to take. And this brings us to the end right now. So these are places that we can connect. If you follow me on Abby Rose Green, it is Down Syndrome Awareness Month right now. So I will be giving lots of little tidbits of information along the way. And I think it's a good reason to just follow people who look different than us on social media. I think that, and so another one to add to the other one is Amy Webb has two books about limb differences. They're wonderful. So one is When Charlie Met Emma, and then Awesomely Emma. And I've heard about When Charlie Met Emma, and I love that book. So those are two books about limb differences. Search Amy Webb. Okay, so when you're looking at people who are different, when you're following people who are different, it just makes the world more inclusive because it's not such a, oh my gosh, that person has Down syndrome, or that person only has one arm, or that person has a cleft lip, or that person is in a wheelchair. It just makes it more like, okay, everyone is a little bit different. I'll tell you now, when I'm on Instagram scrolling, I sometimes can't tell the difference if a baby has Down syndrome or doesn't, because my feed is literally 50-50 right now. It's not even something that I notice anymore because I've just been in it for so long. So when we can start, I'm not going to say that everyone's going to get to that point, but it's just so interesting that when you start to surround yourself with differences, and when you start to surround your kids with differences, the whole conversation just comes a lot more naturally. So with that, I am open for questions in the chat. I think I did a pretty good job of answering many of them along the way, but I want to make sure if there's anything that you need clarified, or if you want me to go a little bit deeper on, or if you want me to re-say something. I know a lot of you were like, hey, can you say that again? I am happy to re-say things again, because when we all can learn a little bit more, we can grow a little bit more. And that's the whole point of today's conversation, but also a big part of my life is just teaching people the things that I wish I would have known when I was younger. And now that I know better, I can teach better. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. I'll wrap up while giving people an opportunity to have questions, but I really appreciate you coming on and just sharing your knowledge and your truth and your story. Especially, we were chatting beforehand. I have special needs myself, and like especially growing up with a twin brother, comparison was king. Even for myself and the questions I had, like, Mom, why is this harder for me? Those types of things. And so I'm so excited that these are the conversations we're having, because how different my childhood would have looked if more parents were equipped to have those conversations about what different means. So I am just really excited and so happy that we're having these open conversations and learning alongside of each other. And we were talking beforehand too. I have a little, and I've been a mom for 6 months, and I'm excited to see what this next chapter and championing and having these types of conversations are, because my mom did such a fabulous job. So thank you everyone for tuning in. I don't see any questions coming in, but this is recorded, so if you want to come back, look at a slide, we do have the recording. It was a lot of information to take in, but then once again, thank you all. And like I said, the shameless plug earlier, we do have our Dream Summit up registration. It's going to be on November 1st and 2nd, that Wednesday, Thursday. It will also be recorded, so you can come and watch it 30 days after it's aired. But it's a great opportunity to check in on your dream and get the tools that you need to take that next step forward. But I think I saw a question come in.
Any exciting events? So I know that the big Down syndrome walk was happening just yeah, just on Sunday. Gigi's is also putting on a gala where you could dress up. It's a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory themed event. I will be there with my husband. If you're interested in that, they're also accepting silent auction donations. So, all these organizations, and one of the parts that I am learning with all of this is that being a special needs parent with some disabilities, it can be really expensive. Like our doctor bills, our time commitment, it just gets expensive. And so, having free therapy or low cost therapy, such as places like Gigi's, they do everything through donations. So I know a lot of my friends have small businesses and have donated something, but that's another place that if you are looking to donate something, maybe you make bracelets or you make characters or whatever it is, that's another spot to celebrate Down Syndrome Awareness Month with. Yeah, and
Perfect.
then on the Herself podcast, if you want to hear, so maybe you are new to this lifestyle, maybe you are a special needs parent and you are feeling the darkness, you are feeling the dread, like you're not happy go lucky, you're not seeing the smiles that I have on my face in all these photos and during this conversation. I do want to invite you to listen to episode 22 of the Herself podcast. It was recorded 6 days after we got our diagnosis, so very, very early on. And that will just give you some solidarity. If you're somebody who like just wants to hear kind of like the inside thoughts of somebody who might be dealing with a diagnosis, that's also a really good one. So I know a lot of parents have listened to that when their sister or their best friend or somebody who they work with got a diagnosis, and it was just helpful to kind of hear the thoughts that go through someone's mind when they get a disability diagnosis in the first place.
Perfect. We are right at time. And so, just once again, thank you, everyone. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day and week.
Thanks again, everyone.